Guys, I'm still receiving hate on the internet from commenters. Still am. It's amazing, isn't it? It just never stops. I was hoping that eventually every single person on the face of this planet, every single viewer on my channel would love me. But apparently that's just not how the world works. So today we're going to delve into more comments. Yes, you probably already anticipated that with that intro. Some of them are good actually, but the majority of them, not great. I'll be responding to a lot of questions that people had though. Any sophisticated questions that people ask that are lengthy, I'll be covering them in this video as well. So stay tuned, because if you are someone that actually commented something like that, you may be featured. I do see all of your comments, at least at the moment. I'm receiving more and more, so it's harder to keep up. But let's get into this. First one from Maria Callas 9962. Life expectancy of Inuit population in 1950 was 29. Good luck with that. First of all, thank you for the good luck. I appreciate it. I'm sure that you meant that in good faith. But in reality, this argument is silly. What was... First of all, the Inuit population is not representative of the general genome of human beings. Did you know they actually have a variation? There's a different gene SNP with the CPT1A gene, particularly, that actually prevents them from being able to fast and makes it very difficult for them to actually enter a ketotic state, because most of their fatty acid utilization is through thermogenesis, not fatty acid oxidation. So basically using it to create energy. And also ketones, basically acetyl-CoA, keto, blah, 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 blah. You know what? We'll save the technical stuff for some other time, okay? Great, so you're using a population that actually is one of the very few, like the only one identified to not share our genome. They're still humans, but anyway, okay, not to mention, do the Inuit live like us? And also, what else are the Inuits doing that we are not doing? And what are they not doing that we are doing that may contribute to that? These questions I'm going to leave open-ended because they're pretty obviously going to affect that outcome. Okay? Great. You should probably look into sudden death syndrome among the Inuit population precisely for the reasons that I just laid out. They can't fast. If they go too long without food, dead. Done. Okay? Okay. Next. This one's a friendly comment from Matty Cake, Kake, 9859, okay? Remember, veganism/vegetarianism is an ideology, not a science. It's under threat, so it must discredit by any means it can, even if that comes in the form of complete BS. Precisely correct. This was actually in response to my antagonistic pleiotropy video. Check that out if you haven't already. You won't regret it. And yes, it is precisely what I laid out in that video. Basically, veganism/vegetarianism, like you said, it's really veganism more so though, is an ideology, not a diet. And in fact, they actually say that by their own admission. The problem though is the inconsistency. Okay, we're consistent when we say that. It's an ideology, not a science. So no matter what you throw at them, they won't believe it. They're inconsistent though. They say it's an ideology, it's an ethical standpoint, an ethical stance, not a diet. And yet all they do is try and justify the healthiness of their diet, the healthfulness. Why do you care so much if it's an ethical standpoint anyway? Oh, because maybe if they actually realized that it wasn't an indicated appropriate diet for human beings, it would challenge their ethical stance. Because, well, shouldn't the most ethical diet be, I don't know, healthy for humans? Yeah. Anyway, thank you, Matt or Maddie. I don't know. I really don't know. But good comment. Okay, here's a good one. Stargazer Bird says, diabetes is a disease of excess energy, aka eating too many calories, and growing fat deposits in the organs and muscles. The real cure is losing the fat. Complete remission, and you eat pure sugar without issue. Okay, many people have cured type 2 by going high carb, low fat. It drops the weight and improves insulin sensitivity. Keto is just avoiding the problem, not curing it unless it leads to enough weight loss. Right, okay, so not right at all. Let's break this down because there was a lot there and there's a lot to respond to. Okay, diabetes is a disease, yes, of excess energy. No, because the human body doesn't consume energy. Usually when people say energy, they're referring to calories, particularly kilocalories. The human body does not consume energy. It consumes mass. That is not a pedantic, captious viewpoint. Mass and energy are different units, and therefore it skews results when you're looking at food intake, when you use one and not the other. For example, Paul Saladino. Mr. I'm animal-based. No, you're not. You are not animal-based. Do you know why you're not animal-based? Because you eat primarily fruit and honey, Paul. Sugar. But do you want to know why he calls it animal-based? Because the majority of his calories come from meat and animal products. Oh, so they're different units. So in reality, actually, no. Okay, that's not how it works. Okay, you're not animal-based because the majority of the mass you consume, something that the body actually does process, is fruit and honey. Your body doesn't yield calories from food. Calories are not involved in metabolic processes. They're released in the form of kinetic energy, right? Heat energy, as a result of biochemical reactions, exothermic biochemical reactions. And those calories have no effect on the mass balance of the body because they weigh nothing, okay? You release calories, but you don't consume them, and you don't yield them from your food, okay? The human body employs chemical energy, not heat energy. And that chemical energy, in the form of, well, potential energy released from ATP, does not affect the mass of your body either, at least not directly. So, not excess energy, and not even excess mass, by the way, okay? Because that's what you really meant to say. And no, not excess mass. Because, guess what? If the mass is made up of things that aren't conducive to, I don't know, raising your blood glucose levels to a chronically high level that is harmful to your body, then no, it won't cause it. It's about what you eat, not how much. Okay. How much you eat can have a role to play because of insulin signaling and glucose regulation, but it all goes back to glucose and insulin, doesn't it? AKA eating too many calories. We covered that. You can't eat calories. A food doesn't have calories, okay? And growing fat deposits in the organs and muscles. First of all, it depends on what you mean. Do you mean you start to grow fat deposits in the organs and muscles? Because no, you already had those. The human body always has fat deposits in organs and muscles. I think what he meant is actively, progressively growing fat deposits in the organs and muscles. In which case, yes, that does end up happening, but not without insulin. Sorry, not really, not to an obese and overweight status. The real cure is losing the fat. Now, here is something that is not true, but it has some element of truth to it. If you lose fat, you do free up space in your fat cells for more admission of that glucose from the bloodstream into fat. It's like clearing out your closet full of a bunch of clothes. You can't stuff any more clothes in, but once you throw those clothes away or something because you're not using them, and it's been years since you've used them, you can fit more in there from the rest of the room, that being the bloodstream in the analogy. But it doesn't mean that's the cause, because what caused the immense amount of fat? Maybe eating a bunch of carbohydrates that are not required for human consumption. Anyway, complete remission and you eat pure sugar without issue. So he's saying complete remission of the fat and you cure the issue. Oftentimes no, by the way, because there are skinny people that come down with type 2 diabetes that aren't exorbitantly obese and overweight. Okay? But anyway, no, by the way, define without issue. You mean without having diabetes? Because trust me, you still have issues. You'll still have issues. Many people have cured type 2 by going high carb, low fat. Oh yes, I know that. Look into the Randall cycle. I've covered it on my channel before. I've also covered it in my book, Contraindicated, by now. Second edition, by the time you're watching this, is probably already out. So go get it. Audiobook, ebook, paperback, hardcover. People like Stargazer Bird here need to read it the most. Let's start a petition. Stargazer Bird, all haters, please buy the book for your own sake. Okay? Okay, the Randall cycle is a cross inhibition between fatty acids and glucose. If you cut one of them out, you can have higher insulin sensitivity, especially at the level of the muscle, and also, yes, adipocytes as well, fat cells. There you go. All right, it drops the weight and improves insulin sensitivity. Yes, we already covered that. Insulin sensitivity, yes, a construct, but fine. The concept is fine on the surface. It's just highly misrepresented. Yes, Randall cycle situation. You cut one of them out, fat, and keep the glucose. There you go. Cool. You do the opposite, also cool. One of them is our species-appropriate, species-specific diet, one of those options. is seen in our species-appropriate, species-specific diet, and the other is seen in a vegan diet, which is not only contraindicated, but extremely dangerous. Anyway, keto is just avoiding the problem. No, it's actually eliminating the problem, the glucose. Let's take a step back here. Diabetes is a disease characterized explicitly and exclusively as chronically elevated blood glucose and nothing else. Glucose is, in all carbohydrates for that matter, are not required for human consumption, and above a certain physiological concentration, which is most conducively achieved by consuming them, is toxic. So why would you eat the sugar? The sugar is clearly the cause of it. You're not going to develop truly pathological type 2 diabetes without consuming carbohydrates to some extent. Okay? It's just not possible physiologically. Okay, not curing it unless it leads to enough weight loss. Okay, so what he's saying is keto might cure diabetes, but only because of the weight loss. We'll tell that to the people that still remain obese and overweight on carnivore because they're still waiting to lose the fat because they've been on it for only a short amount of time, that also have had a regulation of glucose levels beforehand. Okay. Anyway, let's continue. Come on, stargazer, bird. Okay, next. You say things so matter-of-factly with no sources. Why is meat only a species-appropriate diet? Well, I've already covered that. With stable nitrogen and carbon isotope analyses conducted on the collagen of the long bones of ancient human remains using mass spectroscopy, we can assess on a repeatable basis, bordering on predictable, all across all regions of the world preceding the agricultural revolution, that we ate the flesh and associated fat of large ruminant animals primarily, with added salt when we sought it out, sometimes without salt at all though. Actually, the majority of our existence, we didn't eat salt at all. Not saying that you shouldn't eat salt or something, it's fine. Salt to taste, and water, which means, according to the Darwinian facts of evolution, the principles of evolution, Darwinian evolution, that we are most adapted to be consuming that as a species, okay? Positive and negative selection pressures. Anyway, that's why. Also, you can use comparative anatomy to infer this, as well as biochemistry, like the Randall cycle, for example. Why are we the only apes on the planet who are carnivorous? Well, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't know. It doesn't matter. The answer to that question does not matter in terms of assessing whether or not we're carnivores. We're also the only animals on planet Earth, by the way, not just in the ape family. We're also the only animals on planet Earth that actually have language and can speak to each other in a logical way and can use our ability to reason to either make the world a horrible place or a great place, actually. We're also the only creatures with self-consciousness, which is why we're capable of evil. Okay, so anyway, and no, I'm not saying we shouldn't eat meat, quite the contrary. Okay, that's a step in the right direction. I believe humans are staunchly omnivores. Well, you're incorrect. I'm sorry. You can choose to eat that way if you like. Fine. We're not dogmatic on this channel. You eat a standard American diet, you feel fine, go ahead, keep doing it. It doesn't mean that it's indicated for our species from every inference that we have available to us, like all of our other primate and great ape relatives. Well, wait a minute. What? A lot of them they're herbivores, though. I think the reason most people don't tolerate carbs is that they don't burn them. Well, actually, that's not true. Most people that consume primarily carbohydrates, due to insulin signaling and respective glucagon values, they actually are burning, in other words, oxidizing glucose. And actually, I should still put oxidizing in quotes because you don't oxidize glucose, you oxidize pyruvate, which is the final product of glycolysis. But anyway, okay. To simplify, oxidizing glucose, fine, whatever. But no, that's not true. They don't tolerate carbs that well because, first of all, they chemically interact with the substances of the body that render them unrecognizable to the body, that they derange the proteins. They make them be perceived as foreign. If you're going to refer to the body's actions as perception, which again, that goes down a different road. But no, wrong. Humans evolved to move, carry, hunt, gather, and build, not sit around at a desk all day. Okay, well, this is something that we can agree on. Sure, we're not evolved to be sedentary. That's fine. And I encourage people not be sedentary. But that doesn't mean that being sedentary is at least the only cause of the obesity problem. I mean, here's the thing. If you don't expend most of the food that you consume in the form of potential energy, when you eat your food, you're just not going to eat as much if it's a species-appropriate diet. It's not being sedentary that causes obesity, okay? I'm sorry, it's not. That is a theory that has been debunked multiple times. I have done low-carb and high-carb diets, and the only time the low-carb worked for me is when I was mostly sedentary. I'd like to know what you were actually doing and what you were not doing as well, by the way. Natural strength 89? Come on. You need to understand that just being on the diet and having a problem with it does not mean it was the fault of the diet. Okay? That goes for any diet, by the way. Anyway, high carb has no effect on my fat or health other than positive, believe it or not, as long as I'm working out and staying active. Okay, good for you, but I'd like to understand the way that you actually embarked upon the low carb carnivore diet, what the diet consisted of in the first place, how you transitioned to the diet. Okay, all these details are extremely important. What your health history is. Okay, look, I'm not attacking you for consuming a diet that I don't agree with. Okay, that's not what we do. If you want to be exposed to that, you can go to a vegan channel and you can comment the stuff in a vegan subreddit or something. We don't need to avoid carbs. No one said you need to. You ought to on a species appropriate diet basis, okay? On an indicated basis, okay? Because not avoiding them is contraindicated. Anyway, they'll maybe limit the processed carbs. There's no meaningful difference between processed carbs and natural carbs at all. They're all the same molecules. They're just associated with different things that may or may not slow the absorption rate, which you could say is a benefit, sure, fine. But it depends on what you're talking about. If it's fiber that's stopping the increase, then actually it's just a trade-off because fiber is a contraindication in the human diet too. Again, I cover all of this in my book, Natural Strength 89. Buy it today. Okay, what we need to do is actually use our bodies day to day to burn off the stored carbohydrates, glycogen. Glycogen isn't what's making us fat. Unless you're saying that when your glycogen stores are full, then that's where all the glucose goes is to your fat cells, which, yes, that affects it, sure. But, by the way, hey, what's the thing that causes glycogen to be stored in your muscles? What's the hormone? Insulin, perhaps? First of all, you have glycogen stores no matter what metabolic state you're in, or else you wouldn't be able to twitch your muscles in the first place, and you'd be dead, okay? So, anyway, but why don't you just cut the carbohydrates, and then you won't fill up your glycogen stores in the first place? Because, by the way, people that tell you that you need to fill up your glycogen stores for maximum muscle hypertrophy as well as maximum performance, they are lying to you. That is not true at all. You need some glycogen for muscle fibers to fire. It doesn't mean you need them full. Okay? Not true. So, to make room for more. Yes, okay, so that is what he was saying. I didn't even read that. I already know I'm going to get flames as this comment section looks like they're all entrenched in their camp, but I can't let this go. That's fine. Instead of getting flamed on my channel. Tee-hee. But no, look, you can do what you want to do. That's fine. And I don't say that in a patronizing, sarcastic way. You can do what you would like. But it does not mean that you are correct in what you said. I'm sorry. It would be convenient for you to be correct, but it's not. Okay? I love sweet potatoes. I love honey. I love berries. Hell, I love Ben & Jerry's ice cream, man. Give me a whole pint of that. I'll eat that in one go. Okay? It doesn't mean that we ought to be doing it. Anyway, okay. Reversed type 1 diabetes. This is amazing. Let's give a shout out to 88 Hocus Pocus for that, because you're told that type 1 diabetes is incurable. Incurable. So this is the story. I now know this is not a negative. Sometimes I screenshot the replies because I wonder if there's people that are denigrating the original commenters. But here we go. How have you done that? Initially diagnosed 2 years ago, GAD antibodies all positive, 5-day water fast for autophagy, then carnivore since. See peptide normal, no insulin or meds at all. Recently saw diabetic consultant who discharged me from the clinic stating he has never discharged type 1 before. HbA1c 35 millimoles. Diagnosed, yes, so this is amazing. That is an amazing feat. You are told that type 1 diabetes cannot be reversed. I'm sorry, but that idea is being challenged every single day. Okay? It doesn't mean that it will happen to everybody. That's fine. That's fine. But it's possible. At least it seems. Okay? Okay. Here's the next one. Okay, so this is actually an interesting point. Exercise is a stress, though, and not indicated in any living organism. Okay. So, I have thought about this deeply because I think about everything deeply because that's what being objective requires you to do. Exercise does induce inflammation. Any kind of exercise to some extent. Some more, some less. The reason why we say, at least that I say, it is indicated to engage in exercise that is the most evolutionarily consistent for us to engage in is not only because it's evolutionarily consistent, but it is precisely for the building of muscle tissue. Now, why would that be a net benefit? Therefore, making exercise, proper exercise that is most indicated evolutionarily consistent and most conducive to what I'm about to tell you are the reasons why this is beneficial and a net benefit. What are the reasons why it is a net benefit as opposed to a net negative, and therefore what makes exercise hormetic, a genuine bona fide hormetic phenomenon? The reason is because when you have a buildup of muscle tissue due to muscle hypertrophy, you allow yourself to contend with the surrounding world easier. You allow yourself to contend with external factors easier. You hedge against the possibility of damaging yourself severely from falls, from even experiencing falls in the first place, and also, we all know that life is unpredictable. What happens when you need to lift something extremely heavy? Let's jump to a logical extreme. What if you need to lift something very heavy in order to save someone's life? Or save your own life? And you don't have any muscle tissue on you because exercise is a stressor. That's not a good idea. In the case of carbohydrates, for example, it's not hormetic because what? Are you going to prepare to have to consume carbohydrates if you're stranded in the wild? First of all, you don't need to prepare for that. Our bodies adapt very quickly to that. Muscle is a different story. Anyway, I've thought about this before. So, since it is a net benefit, that doesn't mean that you should be exercising 7 days a week. That is not good. There is a balance to be had, or else it doesn't become a net benefit, it becomes a net negative. So that is why I say that you should engage in properly tenured, properly fortified resistance training no more than 3 times a week, with each day being a full body workout. That's really what I say. People overdo exercise a lot nowadays. A lot. Okay? And not only will that cause chronic inflammation, even if it's low grade, it will also interfere with your ability to build muscle in the first place because the building of muscle happens during the repair process. So after the inflammation is done and gone, that's when the healing stops and you've healed fully. Anyway, movement versus exercise are two different things. Humans would have never put themselves under stress for zero reason. Yes, but the fact is that we did because we had to in order to hedge against being killed by something. And by the way, today that still applies, just in different ways. Okay? Muscle is important to have. Force yourself to get uncomfortable. One of the most dangerous statements she made in this context. So this person is referring to my interview with Dr. Sarah Zaldivar, where she prioritized exercise in people that have chronic health conditions. Now, I would probably, I have some disagreements with what she says, and that's good. That's a healthy thing. But she did make a very good point. Sometimes in order for you to get better from a condition, you have to push through the pain first. Okay, it just depends on what the pain is and what's causing it. Okay, your body is signaling you not to stress yourself for zero reason, especially brainwashing man-made ones. Yeah, so I've already covered that. Just like foods, our body doesn't tell us to eat. If your body is telling you to stop, it's not good for you. Okay, once again, as a general rule, that's fine, but there's always an exception to a rule, and I believe that exercise is one of those exceptions. But I'm not one of those people that tells you to exercise, run a mile every single day and exercise 5 days a week and take 2 rest days or something. Okay, that's unhealthy, in my opinion. Okay, so we covered it here. Myomechanics said the same thing. A subscriber, so I mean this respectfully, exercise isn't all that good for people. It's a nutrient-depleting short-term stressor. I pretty much covered all this. We got a lot to get to, so I'm going to move on. All right, so this is one from I Heart Sacto. Sorry, I know that I always mispronounce these names. Once again, you were just going after low-hanging fruit. Well, that's all there is online. I'm sorry. It's, there's no shortage of them. I'm sorry, but if you think all you eat for 1 year is 2 cows, no catsup, I haven't heard someone say that in that way before, no spices, no salads, etc., that doesn't even sound appetizing. Believe it or not, it's quite appetizing. Also, I don't only eat 2 cows a year. In fact, I might even eat less than that, but there's a lot more variety than you may think. I actually checked out this person's YouTube channel, and they have a playlist saved called Sugar, I think. And one of the videos that's in the playlist is of Dr. John McDougall talking. No. In fact, I've actually critiqued him on this channel. It's the only video that I've ever deleted, actually, fun fact, because I didn't convey the concept that I was talking about in the video very well at all. In fact, I was confusing more people than I was helping them. So I just deleted the video, okay? Yes, sometimes I can be wrong, okay? It happens because I'm a human being. Next, the whole restrictive argument is such nonsense. Every diet is restrictive if you don't allow yourself to eat everything. This is what I've been saying forever. But this person, Enjoyment Boy, covered this way, way better. He said it in a better way than I could ever say it. Technically, I restrict my consumption of lead, but no one would say that was a bad thing. What about someone who was carnivore from the day they were born and had never eaten any plant matter? Would they consider their diet to be restrictive or just normal? If I include everything into my diet that I find appropriate, is it restrictive still? I'm so sick of people outright refusing to be linguistically accurate. Yes, precisely. Now you understand my problem, my annoyance with the people I react to. It's amazing. Next. This is in response to my Gil Carvalho reaction. Gee, he reports the science instead of parodying the fantasies promoted by influencers. Shame on him. Well, shame on him actually for not reporting science at all, but theology, and believing that it's science and believing that it can actually give us any accurate idea of what humans should be doing at all in their lives, including what they eat. Okay? Shame on him for that, yes. Okay? Shame on him for also misrepresenting the studies in the first place, by the way. Absolutely ridiculous. I'm not really an influencer, really. It just depends on the definition that you're using for influencer. If I'm an I influence people, fine, okay, great. It's a very vague term, but it's not a fantasy that I promote. I don't know what you're talking about. Tell me what it is that is a fantasy, sunshine. Anyway, yes, we are carnivorous, but how long did we live for back then? The oldest people on the planet eat a high-carb, low-fat diet. End of discussion. Okay, so first of all, there are a lot of long-lived people that smoke all day and drink all day. Okay? Should you be smoking all day and drinking all day? No, unless you're drinking water. Yes, I know. I'm really annoying with that. Okay. Also, how long did we live for back then? I'll actually answer your question with a rhetorical question. Okay? What else were we doing back then? I don't know, being eaten alive by animals? Perhaps. So this is stupid. We've made technological advancements when it comes to curtailing disease. Give me a break with this. Seriously, look at infant mortality rates and look at how much that skews the results. Childbirth is a lot safer nowadays. All right, next. Humans are vegan for trillions of years. Okay, so this is just... Do I even need to respond to this? Trillions of years? The existence of Earth isn't even that long, buddy. The existence of life itself, DNA, is not even 1 trillion years old. Not even half a trillion. Okay, good stuff there. Great. Here's another one. I definitely am biased towards meat-based thinking. I eat raw meat, etc. Nice. But I like to play devil's advocate too. For anyone reading, is it possible that due to our human ingenuity and evolution on all levels that we were able to transcend meat eating and be able to domesticate / hybridize / etc. fruit trees and sugar sources and include those into our lives therapeutically and with value? For example, it can't be understated that we love sweet things. How do you explain such a desire for sweet things even if we have been eating and living animal-based for so long? It is almost like our body-mind-spirit complex led us to being able to grow / breed sugary fruits, fruit being the #1 sensible contender, and spread them amongst society in markets, yards, gardens, etc. Maybe that is where human evolution is headed, a mix of the two, or more sugar-based in general. So that's the first paragraph here. I'm going to say this is a very interesting comment because I've also thought about this before. Most of the comments that are very sophisticated, convoluted concepts, I've thought about before because my brain just goes crazy. My brain constantly tries to disprove every single position that I hold. It's really, in a way, it sucks, but also it's really important. So I'm thankful overall for it. You got to think. It is true. When we were frugivores, before we were carnivores, we were frugivores. So when we were consuming a carnivore diet, that was technically a species inappropriate diet, wasn't it? And yet look where we are today. We transcended plant-based eating. It's a very interesting concept. Could we do that again? It is possible. Yes, it is absolutely possible. However, 2 things. #1, I think that overall, it's not going to have positive effects on our brains. You got to think. We were frugivores when we started eating meat, even though it was a species inappropriate diet. Every associated change was beneficial. Every associated change. When it comes to eating a plant-based diet, every associated change seems to be very negative. Besides the ones that are really most likely attributed to eliminating Twinkies and ding-dongs and stuff like that. Okay, yes, you're going to have some benefits by going on a plant-based diet if you eliminate all those things. But it leads to an interesting discussion. Leads to something else entirely. What if every animal could become us, in a way, plus or minus, if they became carnivorous? What if meat-based is actually superior for every species, at least long-term? It's something that I've actually thought about before. It doesn't mean that you should start feeding your cow a bunch of meat straight. Again, we're talking about a slow change in dietary patterns. I wonder, it has been the case that if you give herbivores meat, they actually process it just fine, as long as it's not their complete diet, right? It's a very interesting concept, extremely interesting, and I kind of want to write about it, actually. But in terms of transcending meat eating and becoming adept at consuming plants primarily, I don't really think that's going to happen. If anything, I think we're going to regress, even if it becomes our species appropriate diet and we become most adapted to that. I think by the time that we do that, we won't even be talking about these things in the first place because we will have lost our ability to reason entirely. So anyway, next paragraph. And there is a lot that needs to be contextualized here. No, I am not talking about Walmart fruit. I'm talking about the highest quality fruit you could get based on seasonality, locality, picked perfectly ripe from a tree with a very healthy soil. I've done experiments with juice/fruit fasting unto which those results would give carnivore people a run for their money. Well, that's interesting. I'm curious to understand that more. No, I didn't do it long term, so I'm only suggesting it as a short-term approach for anyone curious. Yeah, so I pretty much covered it in the first paragraph, but yeah, it is an interesting thought experiment. Next, yeah, people have been eating meat and plants forever. You can be plant-based, you can eat meat. Okay, so people have been eating plants for, well, the entirety of our existence, including proto-humans. Yes, exactly. In what amount? Let me ask you a question. All the plants that you see in the supermarket today, or in the farmer's market even, how many of those actually existed 100,000 years ago, 50,000 years ago even? And of the ones that did exist, how many of them were the size that they are today, were as sweet as they were today, were as starchy as they were today, et cetera, depending on what plant you're talking about? And how available were those plants? Once again, back to my original point. This is silly. Okay? Okay, good. Glad we got that out of the way. Next, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't it true that our very distant ancestors were originally at least omnivorous, if not completely herbivorous? Sure, evolutionary changes like that occur at a glacial pace, but they have to begin somewhere. Yes, so we began as actually frugivores, it seems. That's why we have their teeth. Anyway, an argument could be made that the agricultural revolution marks the beginning of such a shift. Okay, actually, this bleeds into exactly what I just talked about. Exactly what I just talked about. After we switched to carnivore, we hunted the mammoths to extinction, but after we switched to agriculture, we dominated the entire planet. By the way, when we switched to agriculture, we were still primarily carnivorous. As a whole, there were some societies that weren't, and fair enough. But yeah, we thought that since we could eat plants, it's like, oh, great. So, you know, we can eat them as an alternative fuel source, and then we just never stopped doing it because we never realized that we're not fully neutralizing the plants. Anyway, from an evolutionary standpoint, which doesn't necessarily care about the longevity or health of an individual, carbs seem to be the better way. No, because, well, look, 12,000 to 13,000 years is not enough for us to have evolved to consume the plants that we're consuming today. Not at all. Not to mention, this is not a natural evolutionary pattern. We have hybridized the plants using our ability to reason. No other animal would have done it. No other animal would have done that, or can do that. So it's actually still different. Now, clearly that doesn't mean jack to individuals living today, but I wonder if we're being just like the monkeys millions of years ago, laughing at our retarded cousins who crack carrion skulls with stones and risk infection and disease while we munch on plants because that was our species appropriate diet at the time. I don't know. Look, we know that the species appropriate diet for our species, either way, even just putting aside the thought experiment in the first place because it's not reality, it's still meat and animal products. So anyway. It is an interesting thought experiment. LOL, calling Liam arrogant? This was clearly on a video I did a long time ago, actually, on Liam Fisher-Layton of The Plant Slant or something. Ugh, hell. You are far more arrogant than anything I've ever seen on this channel. Good luck. No wonder you have such a small following compared to him. Ever growing! I'm thankful for many of the people that have promoted me in the carnivore space, for the following that I have, and it continues to grow. And anyway, yeah, so usually what I say, and I think I said this to him, arrogance is actually characterized by a lack of competence, a competence level that is disproportionate to the amount of confidence you possess on said topic. And trust me, I have a confidence level that is warranted. Okay? Anyway, the antagonistic ploutropy argument is always, and I mean always, put forward in bad faith. Yes. This is a great comment, by the way. It only comes up after the idiot in question tries and fails to make a case that we evolved to be herbivores. When it becomes clear that they aren't going to win the evolutionary discordance argument, they do a 180 and say, our ancestors didn't live past age fill in the blank. The lack of exactitude in these numbers and the lack of any citation or source is very telling. Yeah, exactly. But also, from the sources that there are, It's so hard to even tell, but infant mortality seems to be a major role to play. Anyway, so ancestral diets are unimportant. It's moving the goalpost to the point of self-contradiction. Yes, also to be internally consistent, anyone arguing antagonistic pleiotropy should be advocating high meat intakes for the following populations: any growing infant, child, teenager, or young adult, any woman, any who is pregnant or trying to become pregnant or who is breastfeeding, and probably any man trying to become a father. But of course, they never advocate high meat intakes for anyone at all because they are always arguing in bad faith. Absolutely, fundamentally true. 100% correct. That was a great comment by Ed Jacobson77. Great. Cool. Last comment for the day, and this is from someone that also commented earlier, Tom Goff7887. I recognize the profile picture. Not sure why you geniuses, well, thank you, are so down on vegans because they're evil anti-human ideologues that are a danger to mankind. Okay? There are so few of them after all. That's with the help of us doing what we're doing, by the way. Okay? Also, I don't really know the absolute values. You'd have to do a survey. But I suppose it draws attention away from the complete lack of scientific support for the unhealthy diets you consume. There's no lack of scientific support unless you're talking about human nutrition science, which isn't science, not to mention that there isn't science in that field to justify the consumption of any diet or to justify the embarkation upon any lifestyle behavior, because it's not science, okay? You can't do that. Incidentally, antagonistic pleiotropy is 2 words, not 1. Right, I called it a vegan buzzword. I should have called it a buzz term. Thank you. Thank you for... Look, hey, I deserve it, being the person I am, as assiduous as I am on this channel. Still, since higher intake of red meat is associated... okay, so associated, there you go. Also, what is the strength of the association? There you go. Like, there's a question for you. What is the strength of the association? Plus or minus what in the X and Y variables? In what kinds of studies? Prospective cohort or randomized control trial? Stupid as these associations. With worse cognition and increased dementia risk, not risk because that's a cause and effect statement. Risk is a cause and effect statement. There are no studies that can inform upon the risk of any hard health outcome or disease process as it relates to any aspect of human nutrition over any given period of time throughout the entire time human nutrition science has existed. There never has been, and there never will be. Check out my channel or read my book, Contraindicated, link in the description below to find out why. If you can actually withstand the intellectual property contained within the book. Okay? Such oversights are only to be expected. Oh, wow. Real clever and witty. Anyway, Tom, I would suggest learning a bit if you have the capacity to do so. Eat some meat, why don't you? Increase your mental capacity substantially. That was just ridiculous. That was an absolutely ridiculous comment. And your other one was too, and frankly, I can't even remember what it was. I cannot even remember what the fucking comment was. Good job there. Anyway, look, like I said, I absolutely, I try to respond to your comments as best as possible. If they're long and my response is therefore going to be lengthy, I put it up for a video like this. I can only do so many of these videos though. So anyway, if you're featured on this channel, comment below. And I encourage other people to comment as well, because once again, I'm watching. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel, leave your thoughts in the comment section below, like I said. Also like the video, that helps. And once again, buy my book, Contraindicated, if you haven't already. And subscribe to the Patreon if you haven't already as well. Gain access to exclusive content that way. Links to both of those things in the description below. And with that being said, join me next time when we react to more hate-filled comments. Poor me. No, they're pretty entertaining. And also, despite the ferocity and disdain that is contained within a lot of these comments, they actually can be used as an opportunity to teach my viewers some things. Basically, making light out of something bad. So anyway, till then.